Oh, hey, Goat Hydro. Okay, so as other people come on, um, hopefully everyone will be able to come up to speed. So I'll go ahead and just get started. So thank you for joining me today. This is day one. It's been quite a while since I've made any video content, but it's about time to get back into it. So doing this every day for the next month for Aquaponic April, just to help educate everyone out there that's hanging out at home about how to grow at home. It's something that we're all probably on some level thinking about. If going to the grocery store is going to be limited, we might want to supplement that by growing our food at home. So here I am telling you how to do it specifically with ponics technology, but also kind of just how to grow plants in general. A little bit about me: started anything aquaponics in 2014, and I also teach urban agriculture at Highline College during the winters, and I consult for the WSTA on food safety policy for aquaponic and hydroponic systems for farms and whatnot. So given this whole outbreak that's happening and everyone's hanging out at home in quarantine, we have food safety measures are being discussed for farmers and how they're going to keep their crops from getting contaminated. Still trying to figure out how COVID spreads and everything. So there's a lot of development in procedures and stuff. But a lot of that is going to boil down to trust for end consumers, people going to the markets, trying to know if it's safe to grab some fresh produce that's being misted in the produce section, or if you might want to opt for something that's in a plastic package that's gone through processing in a processing facility at a farm and been packaged and is safe from other people walking around at the market that might be contaminating it. So those are some of the things that are being considered as maybe becoming mandatory here in a little bit. Hold on, let me let my cat out. Okay. So, but yeah, so growing at home with aquaponics, hydroponics, and aeroponics, basically, we're using 5 to 10% of the water to grow the same food over the same amount of time. If you aerate it, then often you get results a lot quicker. Aquaponics, we have active biology in the works, just like with organic hydroponics, also known as bioponics, for those of you who can do all of this. And that, helps establish a symbiotic relationship between the plants, the biology, like microbiology, and any fish or worms that might be in the system as well. So how does aquaponics work? For those of you that are new to it, I'll just kind of go over it really quickly. You have fish in fish tank, and they'll go to the bathroom. That wastewater gets moved up to either a series of filters for larger systems, or on a really small scale, you can just a media bed with some porous media like leca, also known as hydroton or lava rock, where worms and bacteria will convert that waste into nutrients for the plants. Those plants will absorb that out of the water, and then that clean water goes back to the fish and just kind of recycles like that. So that's the basics. It can be pretty simple, just like that, or it could be pretty complicated when you start working in growing a wide variety of plants together. And I'll address some questions that have already been posed through emails and comments here in a moment. But one of the things that we're going to be facing moving forward, for those of you interested in setting up a system at home inside, so you can ensure that it's not going to get contaminated from stuff outside, in the wind, people walking by, all of that, is the supply chain. So as you know, shipments from other countries and stuff are kind of slowing down, if not completely stopped from a few of them. There's a lot of equipment and parts, more specifically for cars and large auto industry, airplane industry, aerospace, but it also affects other manufacturers for other processes and companies that make all these plastic pipes and plumbing, PVC. A lot of that comes from Venezuela, and high density polyethylene also comes from like South America and China. A lot of stuff's made over there and then shipped over here and then put together. So as far as what's commercially available right now for retailers and people to buy online, get shipped to you, it might take a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. I know on Amazon, a lot of orders are showing that it'll take until August to receive your shipment. And that's just a trajectory, a projected date. They're not necessarily guaranteed. At least that's my perspective and what I've heard going around. So that's something to consider, is wherever you are, you might have to resort, if you want to do something soon, to what's immediately available in your area. A lot of hydroponics shops aren't necessarily deemed as essential businesses. So working around that and utilizing any available materials that you might be able to pick up at a department store that's still open that provides food. Like over here in Washington, we have Fred Meyer's. QFC, Safeway don't necessarily have like anything larger than like one aisle for housewares, and you find light bulbs, toilet paper, and those kinds of things. If you're lucky to find toilet paper these days, but you're not going to find anything worthy of like holding plants, like whether it be a pot or a plastic grow bed or something like that you can set up on a tier, so you have vertical farming inside your house or something. There's lots of potential options you can go through by going to a department store to find materials. So that's one of the biggest hurdles I just want everyone to be aware of moving forward for the next couple of weeks to a couple of months, is that supply chain breaking down, and the availability of materials to do something at home is going to be rather limited for a little while. So yeah, once we come out of this quarantine, hopefully those shipping lines will open up again, and we'll be able to have broader access to pre-manufactured turnkey systems, as well as larger materials like rolls of low-density polyethylene, which is pond liner, food safe for making larger systems if you have large family or you want to grow for your neighborhood or local community, and stepping it up to that scale and using large float beds or media beds would be an ideal option. So let's see. It's only been 7 minutes, and I've already kind of gone through my little script so far. So getting to questions. I know Shruti over in Shruti in India. Hi, so you just joined. Proposed a couple of questions. So one was, what's the best grow bed for spinach? So spinach does pretty well in float beds and then also vertical towers. But another great method that I've utilized in my classes is just direct seeding, or basically is where you just take the seed and you just scatter it across the media bed on the surface. And what will happen is over time, the moisture will wick up through the media and basically induce germination in those seeds. And it's really high germination rate as compared to putting seeds in little seed plugs and cell trays and waiting and trying to do that whole thing. Just direct seeding seems to be a much more efficient method. And that way you can have a pretty even distribution of plants over the media, and that works out well. If you want to transfer those mature starts from the media bed into cells in your floating rafts, then that's also another good method to do as well. Especially because in those floating rafts, they have you have aeration, you have air stones underneath most of the rafts, provides that extra oxygen content, and that helps induce hyperactive growth. So let's see what else. Yeah, you could also put spinach into grow towers, so vertical towers, whether they be from ZipGrow or Tower Garden. There's a couple other like scattered manufacturers that have similar products in different parts of the world. So research local manufacturers. There's going to be a high emphasis on that coming up, as if there isn't already. So another question is, it's hard for people to do-it-yourself plumbing at home for an aquaponics system or hydroponics. It's not the same as doing household plumbing, P-traps and those kinds of things, because we in aquaponics we kind of focus on solids filtration, which is pretty important. Because if you don't incorporate some level of solids filtration, what's going to happen is your ammonia is going to build up, and it'll harm your fish. It'll mess with your pH, and that could cause your whole system to crash and not really fun to clean up. So, on a small scale, if you use a media bed, just make sure you use 1 gallon of media for every gallon of fish tank water as like a base ratio, like the bare minimum to skate by for having enough biological surface area on your media to provide enough space for bacteria to convert that wastewater from the fish over to nutrients for the plants. If you use any less than that, then over time you'll get an ammonia buildup, or I recommend usually using 1 to 2 times that amount. So 2 gallons of media for every 1 gallon of fish tank water, couldn't hurt. Let's see. So Shruti asks, can aquarium aquaponics be a successful system if worked well on design? Yeah, so for aquariums, one of the primary considerations is algae growth. So what I've experienced both personally and then also from working with client systems that have an aquarium inside of a greenhouse that they use for growing fish and providing the fertilizer for their plants, is that they have a lot of algae growth, and keeping that down, a lot of people will introduce a Plecostomus or like an algae eater fish into their tank to kind of consume that algae and kind of mitigate it a little bit. And while that does work, it still doesn't change the fact that sunlight is interacting with your water. And every time you have that interaction, you get algae growth. And so what I try to do is limit that. So like on a small scale system in an apartment or something like that, if you have an aquarium and you have a grow bed on top of it where you're feeding that fish wastewater up and then it comes back down and does the cycling. Maybe having the top of that grow bed be at a windowsill level and have the aquarium fish tank underneath it, kind of blocked by the wall or the bottom part of the window, so that sunlight's not necessarily interacting with any of the glass surfaces and not touching the water and reducing that amount of algae growth. Another option, of course, would be to just completely, put pieces of plywood or cardboard or whatever you have that's sufficient to block sunlight from getting in, and just put that on the sides of your aquariums, and that will help reduce that amount as well. But yeah, so also for small scale, continuing to address that question, is having a media bed is usually pretty sufficient up until you get to a larger scale, when you're really going to need to focus on having some solid extraction in place. There are ways to take small containers to use those as some sort of solids filtration, where they're imitating like a small swirl filter or a radial filter, where the and I'll get more into detail in coming streams about filtration and whatnot, and how different systems work together to accomplish the solids filtration, and also remineralization, which is a really important thing for growing like high yield fruit crops and stuff, where you take that solid waste and you have it sitting in a separate container that's constantly being aerated, where it continues to break down those solids into high dissolved solid ratio in the water, referred to as total dissolved solids, or TDS. There's also another logarithmic measurement of that called EC, which is electrical conductivity, which measures the concentration of the salts in the water. So, and again, get into that later. So let's see. Commercial development. So there was a question posed about going into commercial aquaponics and what that entails and all of that. So that, again, that's also going to be in a future stream coming up. We'll kind of go into detail about the planning, market research, and those kinds of things, just to make sure that, one, while commercial aquaponics is a great idea, utilizing fish as the fertilizer source, so that doubles as a revenue source, because you can sell them once they're full grown. I think my cat just knocked something over. Anyway, it does take a lot of market research. So planning ahead of time before you even start to grow anything, or even to build the system, because what you may want to grow might be awesome, and your system that you design will do great for that. But it's not necessarily true that your market will want to buy what you want to grow. So go to the customers that you want to have, your leads, talk to them, see what they'd be interested in buying from you, see what plants they really want in their stores or in the recipes for if it's a restaurant or something like that. And then with that information you take from those leads that will hopefully become your customers, you can go back home and design a system that will grow the common denominator crops, is what I call them. So if you have say like you come back with a list of 20 different plants from 50 different vendors. You take the 10 most common, and you'll figure out which grow beds are needed to grow those 10 crops, design a system to provide the quantity that those customers are asking for. And you can kind of start there with your baseline system. You'll be able to grow that amount of crops reliably. You figure out how much that's going to cost. You can either go get a loan, or if you have enough capital to do it yourself and bootstrap it, then just invest and build it. Start providing those customers with those crops on a regular basis. And as long as you stick to a regular regimen, everything should be fine. And on average, it takes 18 to 24 months to get your return on your investment for a commercial system. As long as you have proper planning, you design the system around the crops that your customers want from your market research, and you're able to stick to a regular regimen and practice food safety. Super duper important is food safety, because besides what's going on in the world right now that we're all dealing with, there's also waterborne pathogens, foodborne pathogens that, like Listeria, monocytogenes, and E. coli from mammalian fertilizers, which is why we use aquaponics, because it's fish fertilizer where E. coli doesn't necessarily exist or transfer over, or so it's a big, relief when you're using fish fertilizer instead of like cow, chicken, or bat, or any other kind of mammalian fertilizer. So that's one of the extra benefits we have. Let me see other questions here. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat stream. Let's see, there's another one from Shruti. I'm talking about algae in aquariums, but there's one more stream called Aquascaping. Hardly get algae growth, and still look beautiful. Can we use best of both systems to create something new? So aquascaping, yeah, I've seen that, and I'm pretty sure what you're referring to is basically making an aquarium, putting logs in there and aquatic moss, and making this tiny little ecosystem with all these different fish. It's very symbiotic. And yeah, so those systems do work really well. And from what I've noticed, those are usually like inside of rooms where there's either no windows or there's reduced sunlight interaction, and they have special lights that don't necessarily provide algae growth. And so that's how those systems are able to flourish without any algae taking place. And on that note, also for most aquarium-centric systems, in just looking at like the pet fish industry and how people tend to their aquariums, there's a lot of chemicals and other things that they'll put in there for like conditioning their water to make it safe, or they'll add certain bacteria or sometimes chemicals that will eliminate the possibility of algae even growing, so that they don't have to clean their tank every week, and they just have a couple of different filters and like a small dosing pump that will pull say like 1 milliliter every 10 hours or something like that to keep that dosage going, so that algae never happens. Those chemicals and sometimes those other amendments that they put in the water can be harmful if we ingest them. So if we're growing plants that we're intending to eat in an aquaponic system that's working off of something like that, we just need to be aware of what our inputs are. So with normal aquaponics, you just have your fish feed, you have calcium carbonate or bicarbonate, and then potassium bicarbonate, and to raise your pH and provide potassium and calcium. And then there's soluble potash and other things you can put in there to lower it. Then chelated iron. These are all food safe amendments. Whereas in hydroponics, using calcium nitrate and other things like that, those will kill your bacteria, cause the system to crash, mess with your pH, kill your fish, all those things. So that's why we have to be very careful about the inputs that we're putting into our system. So not just so that we don't harm our fish and bacteria and worms, but so that we don't harm ourselves. We don't want our plants to absorb some of those toxic compounds, and then we ingest them, or even worse, our customers ingest them, and then they get sick, because that would be bad news bears for everyone. So nobody wants to get fined, get their business license revoked, or go to jail for poisoning people. So Does that make? I hope that makes sense. I know you have my email, so you can email me any more questions you have regarding that if that didn't quite address the question. Let's see. So other than that, I did want to talk about gravity real quick. So when it comes to any kind of aquaponic system, gravity is your friend. Want to utilize gravity as much as possible. Awesome, sweet, glad that helped you, Shruti. But yeah, so gravity, basically utilizing as little energy as possible in aquaponics and hydroponics is one of the key environmental benefits. Basically, you utilize enough energy to run one water pump, where basically that pump will sit in the lowest water basin, whether it be your fish tank or a sump tank, which is also known as a collection basin, where that water will pump up to the highest level or highest grow bed or filter that you have in place. And then from there, basically gravity will pull that water down through pipes into each successive grow bed, and then all the way down, either back into your fish tank or into a sump tank. And coming up, in future streams, I'll go over different styles of arrangements for where your pump would sit, which, order of tiers you would have designed for your system so that you can achieve different things. So there's a couple of different methodologies and intentions into going into, setting up a system, so that, like, one common thing that people do for small scale is they'll put their pump inside of their fish tank. And one of the things that I've come across a couple times, even early on in early days, was fish getting stuck to that filter and dying. And that's not only traumatic for the other fish in the area, which will reduce them, not necessarily reduce them, but result in them not wanting to eat because they're scared and stressed. For those of you that don't know, fish get stressed very easily, and they have an immune response where they'll, over, say a minute of stress, they won't eat for a couple of days, all the way up to 30 days, depending on what variety of stress it is. If you take them out of water for a minute and then you put them back in, it's going to take them a while to readjust to being able to be healthy and not super stressed out. Same thing kind of goes with stocking density and not overstocking your tank, so that there's territorialism happening and your fish are competing for space and attacking each other. And then those attacks turn into wounds, which fester and turn into infections and invite other pathogens and organisms to spread in the tank and infect other fish, and it just creates this cascading effect. So keeping all these things in mind as you move forward, not just with designing, but to say if you already have a system and you're unknowingly facilitating some of these processes that might not be best, to maybe make some adaptations to how you're running things. Maybe remove some of those fish and put them in a separate tank. I'll also go over quarantines and pathogen exclusion and inclusion and those kinds of things, containment, so that everyone kind of understand. And that's more of a commercial scale thing, but also on a small level, whenever you bring, anybody that's had an aquarium or tried to have an aquarium for a couple of years will know that when you bring a new fish in, you might want to monitor them for a couple of days in a smaller separate tank to make sure they don't have any ick or crustaceans or any pathogens affecting them that might transfer over to the fish in your main tank, so that you can treat them, saltwater baths, those kinds of things. And I'll go into detail about how those all work, so that those of you watching and interested in doing aquaponics kind of have the tools and the knowledge to move forward and have successful systems at home. So yeah, with that, that kind of ends today's stream. So we've gone just about 25 minutes. If you have any questions or anything outside of the stream, feel free to email me, Seth@anythingaquaponics.com. I will be posting these videos to YouTube, just kind of to create a catalog and archive all of the conversations here. And then I'll be on tomorrow, same time, same place. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully we can get you to start, grow, and enjoy your life with aquaponics. And we'll see you tomorrow. All right. Thank you.